showcase what the Department of Pathology, in conjunction with the CTSA and Mike Shalansky's office and others in infectious diseases, have helped us accomplish in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And this has been really a crisis setting, and we've been working very hard. I also just wanted to say I have my own R01 funded lab that's currently on pause, and basically we're doing this to try to, we want to help end this pandemic so we can all go back to our own research programs. And so we're doing this to try to help support the broader research mission of the institution and the nation. And so I'm going to try to take you through the logistics and some of the challenges that I've faced over the past 3 weeks, so you understand what kind of clinical samples you can expect to get at the end of the day in the biorepositories that we're trying to set up. And so, at least clinically, I'm the assistant director of this lab. This is the main clinical lab in the hospital. And this is what it looks like when you stand outside and you can come by and try to pick up a specimen. This is the specimen pickup window. And if you went over to this, the supervisor who's sitting here, who's short-staffed, and so he's doing clerical work, and you asked him, I want 100 DNA samples from patients with positive COVID, he's going to look up at you and you're not going to get anything. And so that's the first challenge. The next challenge is if you want to send your own lab tech down to the lab.
Eldad, I forgot to ask you, are you okay with being recorded?
Of course.
Okay.
So if you send your own postdoc or lab tech into and want to get into this lab to try to get your own samples, the door is locked and you can't get in without a key entry. And really the only Columbia University cards that will let you get in are the medical directors, which would be in the Department of Pathology. Everyone else who works in there is a hospital employee, except for a specific set of staff that I also oversee, which is why I think I was, in a sense, uniquely poised to try to help this effort. And that is the staff of the Center for Advanced Laboratory Medicine, or CALM as we're known. And so this center was initiated prior to my being here. This was in the late 90s. And I believe Mike Shalansky, who was then the department chair of pathology, along with the clinical trials office, set up this center. And basically it was meant to be a bridge between the clinical labs and, for the most part, industry, but it also does support some internal research at Columbia, because there are many companies who want to develop new assays or new tests, and they need access to the clinical labs to do that. And so currently it's staffed by 4 medical technologists that I oversee. Just so you are aware, a medical technologist is not like a lab tech that you have in your lab. They need to maintain a New York State license, and their salaries are about double what you would pay a Tech B. So just think about that. And most of our industry-funded studies are now also on pause. And so in the clinical lab, we receive about 10,000 specimens a day. They're thrown out after a certain period of time. And after discussions early on, and thankfully the Magda and Michael, who presented before, along with Anne-Katrine Ullman and David Ho, approached me in early March. And then I realized how important the clinical labs are for research, to support research in the institution. And as I approached my leadership, which is Steve Spitalnik, the vice chair, and Kevin Roth, who's my chair, they were very supportive, and they said, just do it and we'll figure out how to pay for it later. And so they've been really wonderful in supporting me in this effort. So now let me take you into some bottlenecks so you understand what I had to deal with over the past 2 weeks to get this to function. So what you're looking at here is a robotic refrigerator that we have inside the clinical lab. And this can store 30,000 serum samples inside, and it's all a robot inside, and then after 5 or 6 days, those samples get thrown out. The person you're looking at here is actually someone from the CALM staff. And what she has to do is we generate pick lists of patients that are positive for COVID. She has to enter them one by one in this little computer over here, and then wait for them to come out this other end while not interfering with the clinical lab workflow, because they also sometimes need to get specimens for add-on tests and other things that are going on. And so basically, she is now essential staff, and she is standing there from 9 to 5 every day, typing in numbers and collecting specimens from this robot. You wanted DNA? This is what it looks like. These are the CBC samples after they're run. These are the EDTA whole blood samples. Over the years, COM has, because we needed these samples for validation studies and other things, they figured out how to find the needles in the haystack in here. But this takes time and it's difficult. And so again, we generate pick lists and we have ways of trying to find them in here. And these are kept for 24 hours and then thrown out. So we have limited time and we run in there and they save them for us now, but we go through them and we pick out the ones that are in our pick lists. So there was, so let me present this other project that I was working on with the infectious disease team, Magda, Michael Yin, and David Ho. When they approached me in early March, they asked me, you know, it would be really important if we could figure out the seroprevalence of this thing as it's developing in New York City before it's a major problem. And since we throw out samples after a week, I had access to samples that were discarded a week prior in mid-February to late February. But this is what that looked like. So this is a garbage bin of samples that are covered in blood, urine, CSF fluid, HIV, hepatitis, you name it is in there. And so the ones with the yellow labels represent emergency room samples. And so we've been picking out emergency room samples to support this effort because that represents people who come into our hospital with broken ankles, heart attacks, other things, not for coronavirus necessarily, at least in February. And that can give us a sense for, and we're currently linking this up with zip codes so that can give us a sense of how this was festering in our communities prior to us really knowing that this was out there. And so we're currently working on that with David Ho's group. But this is really dirty work, and so I just wanted to make sure you're aware that, you know, we need to figure out how to do this safely without harming our staff and being able to provide these samples to David in a safe way so he can work with it, even though he does have a BSL-3 facility. And so now we have the tubes, and then the question is, then what do we do with them? How should we store them for maximal use downstream? And so the type of samples we're getting are EDTA whole blood, serum, urine, nasopharyngeal swabs, which are probably the most dangerous of all the samples because they have virus on them, and stool and rectal swabs, which also may have virus in them. And so the first thing I dealt with in the first week, with a lot of help from the administration and including the EH&S team, was figuring out how to do this safely. And so we opened up a brand new space, and which is now expanded so that we have 4 hoods to work with. That will allow us to do this in a safe, that we feel that is a safe way to virally inactivate some of these samples and to be able to provide them as quickly as possible to the research community. And then began the discussions about what are the various downstream applications that people want to do and what is the best ways to store these samples, because they are limited samples. And I realized that there are people obviously who are interested in DNA, there are people who are interested in RNA, both viral and human. Obviously, there are people who are interested in antibodies, and I need to make sure you understand that we need samples also for clinical validation purposes, because we're trying to bring up serological assays. And so prior to supporting research, we're going to support the clinical validation effort because our primary mission is to support the clinical labs. There are also people who want to run flow cytometry on some of these cells, and there is probably people who want to do metabolomics, proteomics, and other things. And so we had to figure out what is the optimal way to do this and do it quickly and easily, because we're basically working with volunteers. And so the current plan, and we can negotiate this, and if people have other ideas, you can bring them up. But I just want to say I'm getting roughly 50 to 100 emails an hour, at least over the past 2 weeks. And so if I don't answer you, please don't be offended. And if you can target those emails to Jen Williamson's office, that would help me a lot, so that they can coordinate the effort, and then we can get together and try to figure this out. But at the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to store 1 plasma sample, serum, urine, with no additive at the moment, in 2 separate aliquots, which will go in separate freezers off different electrical boards, so that if one freezer goes down, we have the other. We're going to put the Buffy coat in DNA lysis buffer, just 1 aliquot. You might ask why 1 aliquot, and I think you can get DNA from dinosaurs, and so if the freezer goes down, that 1 aliquot should still be good. And then we're getting NP swabs and rectal swabs as well, and we've worked out with Anne-Katrina Ullman, who's really stepped up and helped us validate this. how to store the NP swabs and the fecal rectal swabs, in addition to helping us figure out how to validate this. She's also contributed to the effort by offering her staff. And so she has her staff volunteering to help us aliquot and do things. And so if you do have access to a tech or someone who can be reallocated to this purpose, we need, in a sense, permanent staff to do this would be better than the current postdocs who are volunteering for 4-hour shifts or something like that once a week. I would love to have a permanent staff doing this who would be dedicated to doing this. It is boring, tedious work, but we need people to do this. And so who is
Eldad, we're running out of time. I don't know whether Wendy also has to speak.
Okay, so I just want to say who is doing the work. For the most part, these are people from my lab. They're 2 Italians who, for obvious reasons, volunteered to do this, and they are working tirelessly to do this and not working on their own research projects. And so the thing that's keeping me up at night, and I'll speed up because I know there is the break and Wendy has a few slides, but is the IT. And so we are working on merging the data, and I do have a background in software engineering, but I will need help from DBMI to help make sure we're doing this correctly and that we're linking to the clinical data correctly. But this just gives you a snapshot of some of the samples we've already saved and some of the data that will come along with it. And I've hidden the MRN and the accession number because that's the identifying information that could link to the patient eventually. Just to tell you about the second effort really quickly, I'm sorry, I know I'm cutting into time, but we're also, in order to support the 4 clinical trials that Ian mentioned for convalescent plasma, we need to fill our blood bank with plasma to support that effort. And so we just opened a clinic today to begin screening volunteers who have convalesced after 14 days. Many of them may never have been hospitalized. We're going to need hundreds, if not thousands of them to supply the demand for convalescent plasma if this works. And so each one gets screened with a nasopharyngeal swab and a blood draw, and I'm currently providing them optional consent for genetics, and I'm working with the CTSA to also incorporate that into the biorepositories so that you would have a control group of people who potentially never hit the hospital for your genetic studies. And now I can turn it over to Wendy. I'm sorry for taking more time.
That's okay. I'll go very quickly. Eldad's covered a lot of this. So the point of the biorepository is everyone who's COVID positive in the hospital will be part of something. To be clear, for those of you who might use specimens, we need feedback in terms of what you might use them for and how you might use them. And on the last slide is all the information in terms of who to contact and the website for a 1-page application to be able to do this. These are discarded specimens, as Eldad was saying, so they won't be perfect for everyone, but do let us know what might be useful. There are a few autopsies being performed in addition, and there's some unique cohorts that include pregnant women, children, and individuals who might be early age of onset without the usual risk factors. Next slide. As we're doing this, we're also having the, next slide, Eldad. We'll also have the clinical data that's coming with this. We have a group of expert clinical curators for various areas who are doing this. Part of what we're doing is trying to make this a common Columbia repository. So all the data that's coming in will be shared, whether it's genomic data, clinical data, the other data that are coming off of biospecimens, but that way we can all contribute and we can all learn and we don't have redundancy when this is in place. We'll also make sure appropriate people get credit where credit is due, but right now we're trying to just push this forward as rapidly as possible and generate good data that everyone can use. Next slide, Eldad. As we're doing this, a core set of data that will be available and hopefully very quickly will be genome-wide SNP genotyping, sequencing data that will be at least exome sequencing, the viral genome, which we will also be contributing to some of the efforts that you've seen already presented, as well as, if we can, transcriptomics. We're doing some pilot studies to see how useful that will be. And Krzysztof, if you can go ahead, Eldad. Krzysztof has a couple slides.
Yeah, so I just quickly wanted to summarize why host genetics was our priority. And here, obviously, everyone is aware that there's a great degree of inter-individual variability in a disease course and complications. And our main question is really to what degree host genetics is contributing to this variability. We're especially interested in various organ complications and susceptibility to pneumonia, respiratory failure, death from respiratory failure, kidney failure, proteinuria, myocarditis, pericarditis, cardiac complications, hepatitis, I would add, and also other complications such as anosmia or loss of taste, which is common in these patients. We are also aiming to explain some of the familial aggregation that has been reported of severe complications, including pulmonary complications, and we're very much interested in ancestral differences and ethnicity-specific genetic effects. We're planning to use genome-wide approaches with genome-wide SNP typing and combined with exome sequencing. But of course, we will also do detailed analysis of specific regions, including HLA, ACE2, TMPR, SS2, and others, pathways of interest, especially in the interferon pathways and so forth. We also recognize that this is a large effort that will require large sample sizes and national and international collaborations that will be needed for replication of any of the genetic findings. Eldad, if you could just forward to the next slide. We are reaching out to a greater genomics community. We are building a network across the CTSAs, especially those CTSAs with precision medicine resource. And we're also part of the International Common Disease Alliance network that has formed quickly to address very similar questions at the international level. The next slide. And this is the last slide, just advertising our Biobank website. We do plan to have this resource open as a resource to the entire Columbia University community. We're planning to have a one-page application for access to data and biospecimens. And Jennifer Williamson from the Dr. Shalansky's office is really putting a tremendous effort into organizing this system. So please go to this website, check out the details on information, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to stop here.